People who canceled their wedding last minute. What happened? Story 1. My ex's family had money. They were going to buy the house we found wanted, and we were going to repay them in full, mortgage style. We split up when her mother started telling us how I was going to renovate the house, how we were going to do this and that. I said I think it would be good to live in it for a year and learn about the house a bit. She said, if we are paying for this house, you are doing it my way. I told her I don't like the house anymore. Then during the wedding planning, same thing. We didn't really have a say in it. Mom was trying to impress her friends. The stress goes so bad, we just split up. Bullet dodged. Answer. The mother was already trying to control you through that house. Wise of you to dodge that bullet because it'll only get worse. My cousin went through the similar situation, except for the reveal of his in-laws' true colors happened after a few years of his marriage to their daughter. It was hell for him, but at least he eventually got out when he and his wife moved away to another country. Story 2. After a 3-year relationship and 18-month engagement, my ex decided he didn't want to get married after all, 10 days before the wedding. You're not much fun to be around anymore, as I'm finishing up my degree, student teaching, and planning a wedding. And oh, by the way, would you mind me asking out your best friend? My mom called all of the people on my side who were invited, left the rest up to him, his family. Apparently, a good few of them showed up at the church on the date. He ended up hooking up with the wife of a frat brother. They ended up getting pregnant and married and quickly popped out 3 kids. Then she cheated on him, and apparently she's married twice more since then. He's been in one long-term relationship after another in the past 20 years. I just celebrated my 30th anniversary. Dodged a bullet, I did. Answer. My pet peeve is people who want to break things off but are too chicken to tell their friends and family. I also went through a cheating-esque breakup, but when I told my ex's friends 2 months after we had broken up, it was the first time they were hearing it. Or I had a classmate who got a decent job offer after graduation, accepted the offer but continued interviewing and took a different offer instead. He never called company 1 to tell them. They were still expecting him to start and had a name tag printed out for him on his first day. Congrats on your 30th anniversary. Story 3. Not us, but the other couple that our planner was working with at the time. They were, according to our planner, super non-committal about the preparation. Or at least the groom was. He kept kicking the can down the road on any big decisions. Then it became clear why. Not only had he been cheating for a while, by the time the couple canceled, the other girl was 3 months pregnant. Story 4. It happened 3x in a row. Then COVID took the world by storm. Then my grandfather announced a heart revision surgery after his risky initial surgery years earlier. And while he survived and is perfectly fine now, he announced his wedding. And my husband's surviving family left the state to move to a LOC of living area, so we simply gave up. I never wanted a blowout event or even a hired planner, just an intimate vow ceremony, signing the paperwork in a small private party, so it was fine by me. We ran off to the courthouse on our anniversary for vows and paperwork, and only invited our loved ones to meet us for brunch afterwards for an intimate yet casual reception. We brought cheesecake and cannolis home for dessert as the wedding cake mayo. Answer. Every time we plan to announce our engagement and make plans for the wedding date and party, someone in my husband's family would die. The cynic in me was primed by all the other comments to assume your fiancé was just making up dead relatives to avoid getting married. Instead, your comment turned into a feel-good story about what marriage really means. Being a team, handling the random challenges life throws your way, and keeping your priorities straight. Story 5. Had to cancel 2 weeks out. He lied about serving in the military, and I come from a Navy family. When we met, he told stories about how he served in the Army. Fast forward 4 years to the engagement, and he is telling people how he served in the Marines. Turns out he took his dad's Vietnam War stories, changed the branch, countries, and all details, and would pass the experiences off as his own. After I confronted him, he chose denial gaslighting, saying my memory was wrong. I went to my parents for help. They ran a background check and found no prior military service and criminal charges he'd never disclosed. They canceled everything while I packed up all his chute, crammed it into his car, and had it towed away while he was gone. Found out while doing all that he had been cheating on me the entire time too. Go figure. Answer. My friend was dating someone 18 months and she somehow found out he lied about being in the military. He said he didn't like to talk about it, especially around his mom, and she thought she understood because he eliminated people. Turns out he never served and was lying about all of it. He was also cyber cheating on her computer while she was at work and school. She dodged a huge bullet. Story 6. My fiancé met me for lunch and slid a prenup in front of me 2 weeks before the wedding. I would get nothing, ever, and I would have to help him take care of his mother. There was no such provision for my mother. He took me somewhere to get it notarized, and I refused to sign it. He tried to bargain with me, but I was not having it. I took the dress back to the store, kept the shoes because they were cool, and canceled everything. He suggested couples counseling, and I went once. The therapist told me she thought he had a screw loose. Then he stalked me. Shrug. Answer. Totally different circumstances to bring us there, but I also went to exactly one couples counseling session with my ex, and he, counselor, told us flat out, yeah, it sounds like her concerns are perfectly reasonable and justified, and she expressed them quite well. So what's keeping you from addressing them on your own? It was so validating, and I realized I was not the problem as he had tried so hard to convince me of. My resentment was justified, and I didn't have to force myself to try anymore. I gave myself permission to walk away without a second thought and did so. Most effective counseling session I've ever had, and I've been in therapy independently for many years. So happy to hear that it's not uncommon for couples counselors to tell it straight and help the aggrieved party know they aren't crazy. Story 7. Many years ago, a colleague was getting married. I was invited to the wedding and his stag night. The stag night was on the Thursday night before the Saturday wedding. We went for a curry, then on to a nightclub. By about midnight, I left and went home, leaving the groom and others to it. This was pre-mobile phone days, so on Saturday, me and my girlfriend got ready. She'd bought a new dress and looked great. We'd booked a room in the hotel the reception was being held in. Got to the church, and at the door, the best man, the groom's brother, was explaining that the wedding was off. The groom had met a girl at the club and spent the night with her, now decided she was the one for him, and the wedding was off, and was calling his brother every name under the sun at the same time. As the reception was all booked and paid for, he said we could go to the hotel and have the meal, stay for the disco and buffet if we wanted. Most of the work colleagues and various family were booked in there, so we went, and it ended up with about 50 people having an enjoyable but uniquely awkward evening. Story 8. I was engaged for 3 years to a single mother. She was great, a fantastic girlfriend, fiancé. The relationship was near perfect, except for one thing, her 8-year-old boy. Over the 3 years, his behavior was getting progressively worse, mostly at school, but he started to bring the behavior home. Around my fiancé, he'd be as good as gold. The moment her back was turned, or she'd pop out to the shops, he would turn into an absolute terror. He'd break things and blame me. He would harm my dog. I caught him trying to pull my dog's eyes out, Favs. He'd steal my things, etc. My home life was miserable because of it. My only happiness came from when he was at his father's every other weekend, and at 4 p.m. on the Sunday when he'd return home, it was like a storm cloud coming over all of a sudden. I was depressed, stressed, which caused me to gain an enormous amount of weight. I would lock myself away in the bedroom just to be away from him. Then one day I realized I could leave, so I did, 2 months before the wedding. My family were pissed. Her family were pissed, but nobody saw how miserable I was. Fast forward 2 years, in the happiest I've ever been, in the leanest I've ever been, I managed to secure a high-paying job. I'm debt-free with a healthy amount of savings. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I've achieved something, and I'm proud of that. God knows where I'd be if I had gone through with the wedding. Answer. Dude, this is crazy. I feel you so much. I was briefly married to a guy with a 15-year-old. Kid was a fudge psychopath. He stole my iPod and then played a bunch of my very obscure songs for me, pretending like he knew these songs. He stole his dad I's toys and used them. His mother once found a full trash bag of my clothes in his closet. Bras, panties, thongs, a dress, pantyhose, shoes. He stole my 4-year-old daughter's 3-foot big Dora plushie, blacked out her eyes, and made holes in 3 places. He used to intentionally walk in on me changing or showering, and we caught him listening at the door while we were having intimacy more than once. He also would regularly steal our lighters and phone chargers just to fudge with us. I once discovered a stash of about 40 lighters and 15 or so phone chargers underneath his mattress. Also, he lied about fudge-a-very thing. Kid was creepy AF. Edited BC, I spelled steal wrong. Story 9. Not me, but my aunt and her ex-fiance. My aunt was found out to be stealing from my grandma. A lot, like over $50K. And my grandma had dementia too. My grandma had spoiled my aunt her whole life. Bought her everything she wanted with no strings attached, no matter how much she fudged up. But that wasn't enough for my aunt, apparently. She got arrested, I think felony grand larceny, disowned by the family, and her fiance dumped her when he found out, and now is with a much better woman. Story 10. They died, or so I was told. Nope, he actually moved to Japan with his lover Craig, and they are super happy now. Found that out a year later. Still unsure how to feel about it. Great opening story when I start a new therapist, though. I'm happy now, though, so it's just part of life. I also lost almost no money on the cancellation. Answer, I mean, if you like a silver lining, I guess I'd prefer faking own passing instead of takedown partner as crazy ways to end a relationship. For those seemingly incapable of having an adult conversation or just ghosting like a normal person. That's such an insane thing to do. I'm almost impressed by how horrific it is, and I'm very glad you are not tied down to this person. Story 11. I found out he was living with another woman in another state. She was his broker, not. Additionally, when people started finding out about me canceling, a male friend of mine reached out to ask if it was because of his cheating. I hadn't shared any details, so I asked what he was talking about. Turns out they had been sexting each other, so apparently he was just hooking up with anyone willing. I'm no longer friends with that male friend. I left my ex. He stalked me. I prosecuted him. Edit to add that he was also physically abusive, and I should have left long before all of this happened. Manipulation and gaslighting is incredibly effective. I'm healed, and I don't blame myself for being a loving person. Story 12. Wife's mother was main breadwinner and had agreed to fund the reception. She also had delusions of grandeur, so it was expensive. She lost her job and expected us to cover it. I said no. Cue lots of pouting and tantrums from her and fiancé. Ultimately, fiancé agreed to postpone it for a year and go smaller. Best decision ever. Story 13. I was 18 and he was 23 in the Navy when we met in Sicily. We decided to elope in Malta with a few of his friends over a quick weekend trip. I had just started BC pills, so when we got there, I was feeling very nauseous and blah. So he went out with the boys the night before the elopement. Around 3 a.m., the door loudly opens with him in the arms of his friends, being almost carried. He is tipsy and he is angry. He punches one of his friends in the face and they immediately looked at me and said, "This is who you're gonna fudge marry." And they left. Meanwhile, he gets more volatile. I'm crying. I did the fawn response that night, and then next day when he was too sick to remember or care about eloping, and then nope the fudge out. No? Story 14. My father-in-law committed tragic end a week before. We rescheduled the wedding 3 months later. It was pretty traumatizing. I loved weddings and wedding planning so much, but now I can't think about weddings or look at anything wedding-related without thinking about that week. Answer. My ex-wife's brother committed tragic end right in front of his fiancée a week before their wedding. They got into a big argument. Basa, as they tended to do, they fought a lot. As they were getting in the car to go somewhere, and he got out of the car and walked off to the garage. She followed, and right when she walked into the garage, he put a shotgun in his mouth and blew his head off right in front of her. The worst part is, they had 2 very young children together who were sitting in the car, and when they heard their mom screaming, they came running and saw the aftermath. Shortly after, she moved across the country and ended up spiraling into fentanyl addiction and becoming homeless and lost her kids to the state. The whole thing was fudge up. Those poor kids, man. Story 15. Knew a guy whose mom died unexpectedly the week before the wedding, meaning the funeral would be a couple days before the wedding. He was emotionally wrecked and asked his fiancée if they could delay. Fiancée refused and started posting in Facebook about how she was being betrayed. At that point, he formally called it off. Then her parents called him and demanded refunds for their deposits. Bride refused to return the ring, which had been his recently deceased mom's, so he got a lawyer involved. Story 16. On the way there, I found out they'd planned to cheat on their spouses. I was disgusted and asked him to come get me. It was 5 hours away, and I hadn't driven, and he refused. Because I was in the middle of nowhere and trying to play it cool as I had an entire weekend with them, I went to a bar with them. They tried hooking up with some guys. I chatted with another married man about my wedding, his wife and baby, etc. Well, turns out that instead of getting me, he got tipsy. Really tipsy. Video called me, unable to keep his eyes open, passing out on camera, cursing me out and calling me a cunt and a whore and just absolute vitriol. I just took it. He had called me a whore since the beginning of our relationship because he was a virgin when we met, would accuse me of cheating or say he couldn't trust me, etc. I have never cheated. He then told me he was going to eliminate himself, that it was my fault, ended the call, and didn't pick up again. Must have called him 200 times. Wasn't sure if I should call his parents or an ambulance. I believe I called his mom, who told me he was safe. Can't remember. Ruined the entire possibility of fun that weekend, obviously, which was already shot by being forced between a rock and a hard place with these people I thought of as my friends. I came home to our bed frame being broken, his phone being broken, etc. Well, that was the day he got sober. We tried really hard to work through it. mostly because we'd already owned a home together, and I was embarrassed to tell anyone and ashamed at having my relationship fail when nobody suspected any of the problems. He started smoking plant substance instead. Found out that while I was working and paying all of the bills, he had taken out $20K in student loans that he used for adult beverage and plant substance. That was a week before the wedding. For some reason, learning that he was going to unapologetically potentially saddle me with a ton of debt was my limit, and somehow a bigger betrayal. Unfortunately, we did end up getting together and engaged again, but I realized much faster that it wasn't going to work for the same reasons as before, even though he wasn't drinking. So yeah, engaged twice, married nil. Answer. So much of this reminds me of my ex, specifically getting tipsy and calling when I was out just due he could ruin my night. Also calling me a whore and accused me of cheating because I'd slept with more PPL than he had. It was just all his insecurities. He actually attempted tragic end after we broke up just so he could blame me because I wouldn't drop everything and travel 4 hours, I didn't have a car, to be with him. It was exhausting. Story 17. She came home just under a month before our wedding date and ended the relationship. No warning, no fights, no mention of any serious grievances prior to ending things. Just surprised me after work and said we are incompatible, and then she was gone. In hindsight, there were definitely issues we needed to address, but to end the relationship outright less than a month before the wedding without talking about things was the route she took. Obviously, the wedding was canceled because of this. I randomly met someone that knows an ex of hers, and they said that she blindsided him with a breakup too, though not engaged. She moved most of her stuff out over a month, and that was that. This was over the summer and was devastating on so many levels. I am still unpacking in therapy and trying my best to work through it positively. Tough when someone you were fully committed to and truly love goes out for milk and a pack of smokes. On the plus side, it's inspired some positive changes in my life. Would not recommend though. Answer. Similar thing happened to me. Early 2018, madly in love, crazy happy. We were together for several years, was convinced I was going to marry her. We were about to move in together, something she initiated and had never lived with anyone. Then 2 days after looking at a house that we were excited about, she came over, broke down crying, and ended it. I went through the same emotions. We couldn't talk about this, go to counseling, we're just done. I had to work thought it in therapy as well, but it took time. I wasn't doing well from 2018 to just before COVID. Married with a kid now. Hang in there. It gets better. Ed, I see that you're in the PNW and I'm starting to wonder if I'm the other breakup you heard about. Ha ha. Story 18. I realized we would have ended up divorcing within the year if I'd have stayed, and I really don't want to end up divorced at any point. Also, I dislike everything we had planned for the wedding, and even a month out, I still hadn't really been officially proposed to. We just kind of agreed that we were engaged at one point, and he said he'd propose with the ring and all that, but never did. I should have also known when the venue we originally looked at permanently closed abruptly, and everything we kept aiming for kept falling through. Feels like a sign looking back. We also had a kid together, and he wasn't a good or present dad, and even less so of a partner. I was miserable. We had to do mandatory marriage counseling to be able to get married in our church. I'm no longer religious either, and by the second session, my intuition was screaming at me to leave. So I did. I walked away a month before our wedding, a week before our son's first birthday. Lost every bit of money we'd paid into it, which wasn't a ton, fortunately, but it sucked at the time, and I just let it go. I'm now married to a wonderful man who I just welcomed a new baby with last week. I'm glad I waited, but it took me nearly 10 years to find my now husband. Story 19. 12 years. On my birthday, 3 weeks before the wedding, she told me she was leaving. Pretty much that was it. No discussion, no follow-up, just ghosted after she packed her things. My daughter was devastated, never saw her again, blocked on everything. 2 weeks before she gave me a card telling me how much she loved me and couldn't wait to marry. I'll never understand it. Story 20. Met a couple on their way to the courthouse to get married a few years ago. Apparently they had to cancel their ceremony because a mudslide caused by Hurricane Helene flooding took the church they were supposed to get married in right off the side of the mountain. Story 21. IDK. If it counts as last minute, canceled a few months in advance. The first time canceled because of COVID, spring 2020, and I didn't want to do it with restrictions. Later that year, I got extreme mental health problems, so canceled again in 2020 and 21. Started putting in the work and worked through a lifetime of trauma and realized my now ex, then fiance, had the same behaviors as my abusers. I was just blind to them before. Plus, he managed to show me an ideal picture of him instead of the reality. He has a lot of narcissistic tendencies, DK, if he qualifies as an actual narcissist. So 22, canceled because I saw him for what he was, an abusive, manipulating pause that gaslit me about his adult beverage addiction for years to the point I actually thought I was insane. I didn't trust my sense of smell, my perception, my experiences. It really made me decline mentally. I broke free, which took a while, learned he also saw multiple women behind my back, and regularly stole money from me for his adult beverage. So that was something. Educated myself on abuse and learned how deep it went. Learned a lot, actually. I'm doing a lot better now. I made actual progress since breaking free from him. I'm a lot healthier mentally and grew a lot these past few years. I came a long way and the road here was brutal, and it continues to be, but I'm so much better for it. Not trying to brag here. Story 22. Not me, but someone I knew via work. Night before the wedding, he and a mate visited an adult worker, refused to pay, beat up the adult worker, got arrested, and he spent his wedding day in a police holding cell. No wedding that day, and never with his fiancée. Story 23. We were living in Oregon when we decided to start planning the wedding. My wife's family in New Orleans said they'd help plan something and pay for it. We said fudge, yeah, and headed over for a few days to check out event spaces and discuss the plan. By the end of the first day, we were told that our wedding wasn't about us and that we needed to start acting like people after we didn't want a bunch of random people we had never met invited. But those people would have brought money as gifts. So her family thought we were being unreasonable for not wanting them. At the end of the day, my wife's aunt kicked us out of the house for being ungrateful. We met up with some friends and ate a tab of LSD by the bayou. I told my wife we need to stop letting her family try to control our lives through money. We ended up getting married at the courthouse in Oregon and having a beautiful day hiking through the forest with our friends. When we called our families the next day, her mom's first question was which parent she called first. Her dad said the way she did things was improper. Answer: the entitlement of anyone saying your own wedding is not about you is fudge mind-boggling. Good for you for taking control, doing things your way, and not caving to their demands and snide comments. So many older relatives try to exert financial pressure to get their way and dictate their family's lives, and throw a tantrum when it doesn't work. The peace and happiness of knowing you did what was right for you is priceless. That forest hike sounds like a lovely memory too. Story 24. We canceled our wedding a few months before. We'd rushed into booking something, paid deposits, sent out invites, but then realized actually we don't want a big wedding. We're both low-key people and planning was just getting on top of us. Plus the cost was spiraling. We decided to just cancel before the next set of deposits were due. We lost around $3,000 in deposits, but it was definitely the right choice for us. The wedding should have been in June. We're still together, still planning on getting married once we've cleared some debts. We're just going to elope somewhere with our son, his and my best friend, simply so we don't have the you didn't invite complaints from family, and come back married, then have a reception party a few months later. Story 25. My wife's ex-colleague had a wedding canceled on her by her boyfriend with days to go. She wanted to get married because everyone else around her was, but boyfriend wasn't on the same page. They broke up. Then she completely melted down. She was on the train home and told my wife she was nipping to the loo, and then she came out of the loo naked. She had flushed all her clothes down the toilet and didn't make any sense. My wife placed a coat around her and phoned her parents, who came to the station to get her. I think she went to a hospital. She had just broken down with no apparent warning. Mental health is no joke. My wife left the company, and I don't know what happened to the lady after, but I sure hope she's okay. Story 26. A long time ago, a colleague was finally marrying her partner of 20 years. They were the perfect couple, really complimented each other. 2 days before their wedding, he eliminated her, hit her repeatedly in the head with a hammer while she was in the kitchen. His defense? He had none. He was holding a hammer. They were chatting about something mundane, looked at her head and hit her, and didn't stop. Story 27. COVID happened. We already had a private B&B booked for the two of us, so we went ahead and drove the 9 hours to our intended ceremonies site, outdoors in a park, and privately said the vows he had prepared. Came back 2 years later and actually had the official wedding. It ended up really working out because my brother, the originally planned officiant, ended up stabbing us in the back and burning bridges with everyone in my family. We're very grateful he didn't end up actually being a part of the best day of our lives and tainting those memories. Story 28. 3 weeks before the wedding, during Thanksgiving dinner, He told me that he had been cheating on me the entire time we were together. After our guests left, I proceeded to destroy his kitchen. He threatened to call the police if I broke anything else. So I threw a chair through a window. I called a friend to come pick me up. He never did call the cops. I seriously thought he was going to. 3 months later, he married his girlfriend. The day he got married, I sold my engagement ring to my neighbor for $20. Within 5 years' time, his wife had a baby with another man. They got divorced. He moved back to his home state, and I got an email from his sister telling me that he had a heart attack while on a ski trip and didn't survive it. Answer: the fudge. Why did you destroy random shoot for no reason? Breaking up is free and easy-ish. You know this is domestic violence, right? How'd you feel if a guy proceeded to trash an entire kitchen and throw a chair through a window? Passers-by, hello, because his GF cheated on him? If you think cowing people with fear is somehow good, there are many, many guys out there who have rather regretful stories to tell you. Story 29. The morning of the rehearsal dinner, literally the day before the wedding, a sobbing young woman arrives at the rental where most of the wedding party was staying. She confessed that she had been having an affair with the groom-to-be for months. The bride was an emotional wreck, and her family lost a lot of money, but she definitely dodged a bullet. Story 30. Oof, this one hits close to home. We met while hiking across America. Both of us were hiking from Mexico to Canada that summer and met a few hundred miles into our hike. Spent the next 1,500 miles and 4 years together. 11 days before our wedding, she claimed to have a spiritual awakening that led her to change her mind. She canceled everything. We had already put down deposits and paid for everything. The travel, the venue, the everything. Both our families had purchased tickets to fly out to Colorado where the wedding was planned. It led me into the worst chapter of my life. Shortly after I ended up moving out into my car, I was still in love with her. She was my entire world, and I thought she was the one I'd spend my life with. It left me devastated, but it was like a light had just flipped in her head, and she decided she was no longer in love. We tried living together for a while, but it was the most painful experience of my life. She just completely flipped and saw me as nothing more than a roommate. It destroyed me. And that's why I had to leave the home we shared. I thought I might have to change cities. She was still close with all our shared friends, and I suddenly found myself completely alone. I couldn't attend social gatherings without seeing her and watching her date the friends we used to share. Even writing about it now, years later, is hard. I ended up living out of my car and in my work office for about 6 months before finding a place for my own. But even that gave me pain. I'd still see her in town more often than I could believe. And every time I saw her, it led me into another downward spiral. Eventually, I made the decision to physically leave our shared town for my own mental health. I left and went back to doing what we were doing before we met. I left this last summer to hike the Appalachian Trail and try to find peace within myself again. In what would have been our second wedding anniversary, I woke up with a hangover from drinking the night before and decided I needed to do something for myself. I quit drinking that day, for good. I made our anniversary into the day that I became sober. Life has still been a big struggle for me since then, but sometimes I feel like I'm making progress. Literally just last night, I dreamed that we were meeting again. I still have those dreams often. That event and her spiritual awakening have been the most detrimental experiences of my adult life. Story 31. Not my story. All story of a colleague of my mom. They had to cancel because their mom, mother-in-law, depends who perspective you are looking from. She just got too much involved. Started inviting her own friends, essentially treating it as her opportunity to showcase the daughter's success to her social circle, etc. It got to the level that it was clear the bride will not actually have the wedding she wanted. They canceled on the last minute and had another wedding later, being more careful who they will invite. Story 32. Not me, but a friend. Wedding was in Sydney. Lots of friends and family from interstate, including me. His family from England. Got a call morning of the wedding from the bride. He says he can't go through with it, but she's hoping his family will talk him into it as it's just nerves. Nope. Wedding was called off. We spent the day with the bride. She was a mess. It was so sad to see her beautiful wedding dress and shoes ready to go, but not worn. He did the right thing, just should have made the decision to call it off earlier or even better, not asked her to marry him. Story 33. First wedding, canceled it 2 weeks before, engaged for over a year. Realized I had been the one doing all the planning and work. He didn't seem interested. He wasn't supportive of my mental health and basically said he couldn't commit if he didn't think I'd be alive in a few years. For some reason, I dated him for 6 more months before we separated completely. Second wedding, engaged for a year and a half, canceled a month-ish before. With that guy, I had an epiphany moment that I wasn't in love with him anymore and didn't want to be married to someone who didn't want to work on himself and just smoke plant substance all day. The relationship was done, and I left him. When I married my now wife, we eloped BC. I wasn't dealing with all that. A third time, LOL. Story 34. I had to cancel the wedding with my fiancée about a month before the scheduled date, as she sat on a hospital bed in a psychiatric unit that I'd placed her in against her wishes. I'd had to choose between her health and our relationship, and I chose the former. Story 35. COVID lockdown. We still got married by a friend outdoors and socially distanced the day before lockdown started. We didn't want to wait because we had no idea what would happen next. Had our wedding reception 18 months later with all our friends and family. Story 36. Not me, but a girl I worked with at a temporary job after grad school. She had recently gotten engaged and moved for the job, but her fiancé stayed behind in another city. They were planning to rendezvous, move in together, and get married the next year. But she became infatuated with someone else almost the first day of our new jobs. It was another coworker. She spent the next 6 months ignoring everyone else at work, following new guy everywhere like a little puppy dog, announcing every week how much deposit she would lose if she canceled her wedding by such and such date. As it drew closer, all the while insisting she and new guy were just friends. She eventually did cancel, but continued to insist she and new guy were just good friends. On the last day of the year-long job, the new guy stands up at lunch and says he has an announcement. The two of them have been secretly dating and will be getting an apartment together. There was a moment of silence, then laughter. We all knew. You guys weren't fooling anyone. 10 years later, they're married with kids. Dunno what happened to the fiancé. Story 37. I disliked my fiancé. We had been together since we were 15. He was an abusive psychopath, but we had been together since basically our childhood, and our whole worlds were merged. I didn't know how to get out. We were driving in another city, applying for jobs and apartments, preparing for our move after the wedding. As we veered toward the interstate to head home, was screaming at me, slamming my head into the passenger window. Nothing new, but he was so distracted he hit the car in front of us. It was a busy intersection, and he was stuck facing the consequences. I cracked hard. I rapidly spiraled into a full nervous breakdown. He could have eliminated me right there in the street, and I wouldn't have noticed or cared. I was a completely broken human being. When we got home, I told my mother I could not leave. I could barely communicate. She misunderstood me and thought I was asking for us to move in with my parents. She said no. I went to my room and packed to run away. She came in and someone finally realized what was happening. She gathered me up and we bolted. I stood up my own events. When I returned, I went to the police station and filed years of reports. They couldn't do anything, but I wanted it on record. They did go to my fiance's house and confront him. His mother, who had seen him tackle, punch, kick me in the past, was furious that I had ruined everything. I've been free of him for over 30 years, but the scars never permanently heal from things like that. Story 38. I've posted this before, but it's a fun story, so I'll share it again. A friend of mine was with her boyfriend for about 10 years before they had their wedding. Come wedding day, she's having major second thoughts, crying while she's getting ready. Everyone told her it was just nerves on the big day. The wedding is held, documents are signed, everything seemed fine. The next week goes by, and she explains to me she doesn't want to be with him anymore. And within a month, he was moved out. They figured while they signed the documents, they were never sent to the courthouse, so no harm done. They never actually got married, or so the thought. Come a couple years later, and she gets a text from her ex-fiancé explaining that he is trying to get married to someone else now, but can't, because turns are they are legally married. I guess someone, the officiant maybe, sent in the paperwork for them. For whatever reason, it took them quite a while, like another 2 years, for them to actually divorce, which I like to make fun of her for because she was actually with someone else too, except she was pregnant now. So she got knocked up by someone who wasn't her husband. It's all settled now. Story 39. I didn't know the guy, so maybe he was a male body part, but I can only imagine the absolute whiplash he felt. He went from about to get married to single, living alone, and making a lot of awkward phone calls in the space of about 3 hours. No idea what happened to him. She got married to someone else a couple years later. Story 40. My fiance's mom died of a rare and unexpected brain cancer a week before we were supposed to get married. She was the sweetest and most vibrant person ever. My mom isn't very sweet or emotional, so I was so excited to have her as my mother-in-law. It didn't seem appropriate to get married for the obvious reasons. We're still together, but I'm hesitant to plan an entire other wedding. I'll just get eloped at this point. Story 41. Not what you're intending, but I'll share my story. We were supposed to get married March 21st, 2020, but COVID happened. We canceled the wedding 6 days before it was supposed to take place, and since we didn't know anything, rescheduled for September 2020. That was still COVID craziness. So we got married in September with just our parents and sisters present, and then had a vow renewal on our 1-year anniversary that looked and felt like it was an actual wedding since we had already paid all of our vendors, and they wouldn't refund us, but allowed us to reschedule. Story 42. My cousin canceled a few weeks prior because COVID was huge in her area at the time. It sucked because we had already booked flights, hotel, took days off work, and had plans for exploring the city. I wasn't mad though. A lot of elderly people were going to attend, and she didn't want them getting sick and possibly dying. I completely understood why they made that call. My mom, however, was livid. When they rescheduled, they were already legally married, but still wanted to have the whole ceremony and reception, but we didn't go because my mom had to make a huge stink. Oh, are you going to wait until I get it all planned out, then cancel last minute again? I understand the frustration of being out of that money, but I was majorly helping my mom out financially and wasn't upset about losing any money. I told her I would pay for whatever she needed while missing work. I was to begin with anyway. But I was so embarrassed about my mom's passive aggression and messaged my aunt and cousin to please not take it personally, but I didn't want any of that to make them uncomfortable on their special day. That's not even part of the reasons why I went NC with my mom, raging narcissist, and I was over it after 20-something years. Story 43. Someone I know canceled just days before the wedding. They said they loved the person, but something in their heart felt not right, and they couldn't ignore it anymore. It broke both families for a while, but looking back, it was one of the bravest, most honest things I've seen. Better a painful truth than a lifetime of pretending. Story 44. My fiance didn't know how to handle it, wasn't trying to get me to stop, and couldn't accept that I needed major changes in our life to be happy. Mainly that I couldn't live in the small town he grew up in and moved us back to. He refused to leave. I felt stuck and hopeless and like my life was over at 24. I had no local friends or family close enough to see the alarm bells. I was so afraid for my life. I called off the wedding about a month prior because I thought, I just shouldn't feel like this as a bride. This is supposed to be one of the happiest times of my life. I got a new job in a new city. That was actually a city, and built a new life. I'm still suffering financially from the mortgage in our names that he won't refinance after 7 years, but at least I'm not dead. Story 45. Not me, but two college buddies of my sister. The future bride dropped by to visit the future groom and caught him red-handed, jerking off to an adult content video. Yes, that's really why she canceled the wedding. Edit. They were evangelical Christians, and we got no indication the adult content was anything other than your straight back of the video rental room type stuff. Story 46. We decided we wanted a house instead. Living on Long Island, even as a dual-income engineer couple, we just couldn't have our cake and eat it too. No familial support on either side that they would if they could. Everyone's just broke. So we ate the $12K, we put down on the venue and everything, and just told everyone we're not going to do it. Went to the town hall, got married under a gazebo, took a family vacation to New Orleans, then we bought our house like 2 years later. Story 47. Her granddad had a stroke. He was going to walk her down the aisle. She was kind of looking for an excuse to, and frankly, I was too a little bit, as her dad and my mom had started to take over and weren't listening to us. We wanted small and personal, friends sharing the catering, etc. They wanted vintage cars and caterers. But if her granddad had made a full recovery, then maybe it would have happened. We got pregnant not long after, and then we had a small baby. It didn't seem a priority anymore. Story 48. Mine slept with his friend morning of because he had doubts. I found out 15 months later by accident. His best man knew, and so did his daughter and wife, but no one bothered to tell me. There was time to cancel, and I really wish someone had of. This marriage has been a huge mistake and my life's biggest regret. Story 49. Honestly, I think that leaving was amazingly brave of her. Story 50. Found out he was cheating and shooting meth a week before the wedding. We had a 1-year-old at the time. He's been clean for 8 years now, but after 6 years of meth and getting shot for breaking into someone's house, got out of 20 years for 20 years probation. Has lucky. But we still dislike each other and been fighting in court for the last 5 years. Lasai. Story 51. 3 months before our wedding, my ex finally admitted he didn't want to go forward with it. Turned out he was extremely commitment phobe. 13 years later, I'm happily married. He's jumping from relationship to relationship because at some point his partners want some form of commitment that he's not able to give, and we're still friends. Story 52. 4 months before the wedding and 9 years into the relationship, she told me she didn't want kids, despite years of planning on it. Apparently, she thought I didn't care. We originally postponed to give ourselves the chance to refigure out our life together, but 2 things emerged. She didn't really want to do anything with our lives, or at least allow me the chance to do what I wanted with mine. She didn't like to travel very much and didn't want to move to a better city for our careers. She just wanted a simple life where we hung out together, essentially what we had been doing. And while that was great, it sounded deeply unsatisfying to make a life out of. I was ashamed to feel that way. Still am to an extent. Secondly, she became became what seemed quite offended that I couldn't just give her what she wanted. She started bringing up other problems she suddenly had with me, giving me ultimatums despite me asking her not to, and outright refused to help me understand her life vision. She moved out after a couple weeks and only wanted to meet and talk once a week. She didn't want to see couples counseling. It fell apart from there. It took me a long time to understand it all. I felt like the problem the whole time. Sometimes it still feels like a huge mistake to let her go. We're both party members of some mutual friend's wedding next year. That will be hard. Story 53. TLDR. Pregnant bride to back-handled 48 hours before wedding due to prenup. When I met him 30 years ago, he drove an old car with close to 300,000 miles on it and lived in a small, poorly furnished house. My 2-bedroom condo was worth close to twice the value of his house. He did own a small business restaurant, but they only served dinner, so not a huge moneymaker. After 2 years dating, we accidentally got pregnant. He wanted a prenup, and I had no problem with that, thinking he wanted to protect his business that he obviously put everything into. The prenup he gave me showed all his assets. He was worth over $1 million. He owned the building his restaurant was in, owned several properties and a small shopping center, and the prenup was insane. I had to give up rights of survivorship to any home we bought together. He would keep 100 of his income and gains. Even though I was pregnant and he wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom, I would have no protection. Basically, I could be married 50 years and raise his kids. And if he left me, even the shirt on my back would belong to him if it had been purchased after the marriage. I didn't even try for a reasonable rewrite. I couldn't marry someone that could suggest that prenup. We canceled the wedding less than 48 hours before it was scheduled. Story 54. My ex was a narcissist and let his mask fall before the wedding. So I had time to cancel everything. 6 weeks before we were said to be getting married. Broke up for good 2 months after that, and I've been blooming ever since. He doesn't deserve me. Story 55. My ex was having an affair and told me less than a month before the wedding, after lying about invitations, vendors, etc. She then gaslit me into saying it was me before finally confessing to the affair once I found evidence at our house. It was for the best. I'm now happily married to a normal, stable woman and have a family. I do wish ill upon my ex and hope she has a shoot life still, though. Story 56. I canceled a matter of weeks before when something happened that made it impossible to deny this relationship was heading into abuse and had a strong chance of it getting worse. Was dating someone else within a few months and a fake married the same year. So I don't feel like I made the wrong call, just not soon enough. Ended up marrying someone I'd been friends with for years, and we've now known each other, been married for 25 years total. So overall, much, much better. It still crops up sometimes in the way it's impacted my communication or my sense of failure in having inconvenienced so many people, but I don't regret the choice I made. What is weird is that we were both from the same area and knew a lot of the same people, but since I moved away afterward, I mostly just told those that needed to know needed an apology, and otherwise just let people know it was canceled and apologized for the inconvenience. It wasn't an expensive or destination wedding, so hopefully for most people it was just a change of a weekend's plans. When I go back to visit, there are some people who are weird to me, and I don't know if it's for unrelated reasons or if they've just mentally written me off as that girl for canceling on someone, or if a lot of gossip was spread around in the years I was gone. Answer, honestly, if there's one thing I've learned in life is that people who are suddenly weird to you without ever talking to you about it are people whose opinions you can ignore. They obviously don't care about you enough to make the effort to get the whole story and understand, so why should you care about what they think when they won't even tell you what that is? Story 57. We eloped because people on my side kept making shoot about them and their preferences. We had never wanted a wedding anyway. So my in-laws ran interference while he and I flew out of state, got married, had a honeymoon, and they found out 4 years later, after we had our oldest. Found out about the marriage and the baby at the same time via a text from my Mael. Story 58. The groom's mother died in the early morning on the wedding day. They canceled the wedding, obviously due to how sent and shocked they all were. She was healthy. It was a brain aneurysm that ruptured or stroke or something. The couple got married 6 months later at the courthouse and had a small reception a year later. Story 59. I have only one biological uncle and his wife, my aunt. They have 2 kids, my only first cousins. Their son is and always has been ridiculously spoiled. They didn't like their daughter as much, and consequently, she turned out mildly not awful. They're rich AF, snobby, and I haven't spoken with them in decades. My male cousin Joe was getting married. I wasn't invited, but my parents were. I wasn't invited because they knew I was too poor to afford to go to the fancy wedding location. 2 nights before the wedding, there was a big hubbub. My uncle and aunt had apparently hired a detective to look into Joe's fiancée and her family. Turns out she was poor. In their opinion, she had been faking being similarly wealthy. She had over $10K in credit card debt because of it. They also found out her parents both worked and lived paycheck to paycheck. FWIW. I don't think she was poor, just middle class and making bad decisions while trying to live up the expectations of his rich boy lifestyle. I think some of the debt was wedding expenses. Uncle and aunt told Joe to break up with her, and he did. No questions. He even asked for the ring back. They then said since Joe had chosen his wedding date as the day after his parents' wedding date, that guests could just consider the rehearsal dinner as an anniversary party for uncle and aunt. The bride's guests were no longer allowed to attend. Rehearsal parties or the day before the wedding, usually covered financially by groom. The bride was left paying for all of that herself. No idea what she told her guests. He's still single and in his 40s. He never found a woman who's good enough for him and his parents. He's also failed many entrepreneurial endeavors that his parents financially supported. You can fail all you want with zero consequences when your family is rich. I think she dodged a bullet. Story 60. This happened the day before I was due to send the invitations out. 9 years together. Comes home from a work trip looking like a kicked puppy. Refused to say a word to me. I finally say it feels like we're breaking up, to which he nodded, while still maintaining zero eye contact. No explanation other than I've never found you attractive. Do they all have the same playbook? Turns out he was banging a mutual friend back in our home country, who he then flew over to the U.S. where we lived. She quit her job and lost all of her friends, my friends, gave up her house to be with this loser. She stayed for the duration of the visa, around 3 months, after which he then very unceremoniously dumped her jerk because she had served her purpose, distract him from the breakup, and help him get his life and new apartment together. Darn, even I thought that was cold as hell. Story 61. A wedding I was attending, literally warming up the car and got the call not to come. This was at the start of COVID. They had to get COVID tested for something, and turns out they tested positive and had to cancel the wedding. They got married later on and are still married. Story 62. Category 3 hurricane, roads were treacherous, threatened to eliminate vendors and guests on the way to the venue. Parents and in-laws shamed, blamed, and accused us of all manner of things, in addition to not being true believers of God because we didn't want to risk anyone's lives. Story 63. Not me, but a friend's sister, whom I'm close with the family. They've been dating since college, 8 years together, and were approaching 30. She was a motivated medical professional, and the only thing he seemed to want to do was still chase his dream of being a pro sports player, but was probably already past his prime there. We're not sure if he was pressured to propose or why he even did in the first place. Honestly, because as soon as the wedding planning started, he was clearly emotionally checked out. There are a lot of personal things we all speculated about, but ultimately, we don't really know what went wrong and only have what he said to go by. Multiple people commented on how uninterested in the whole thing he seemed to be, but didn't necessarily take that as him not wanting to get married. 2 weeks before the wedding, he disappeared, and when he finally met up with his fiancée, he called the wedding off. Stated he was having lots of mental issues and just couldn't do it, but it felt like that wasn't the whole story. Everything was already paid for, and the bride's family spent a week calling every vendor and trying to work out something with them to recoup any of the money and telling their family the news. Groom's family wanted nothing to do with it. They certainly didn't seem interested in telling people not to go or helping the bride's family get any money back when they were supposed to split everything and had apparently not paid their part yet. It's been maybe 2 years now since then. I don't think she's doing all that great, to be honest, unfortunately. Getting better, but definitely a difficult time for her, and I have no idea how he's doing. He disappeared from our lives entirely. Story 64. We canceled ours due to COVID. May 6, 2020 was our original date. We canceled in March of 2020. We actually went to a friend's wedding right before. We went to the courthouse. 2021 had a celebration 2022. Recently, we went to another wedding. They did the thing where they asked couple who had been married X long to stay on the dance floor. I had a tinge of jealousy as the couple that married right before our original date stayed and we left. Lol, I wish we had planned ours for just a couple months earlier. We lost all the deposits too. Edited to add, I know a lot of people had much worse outcomes from COVID. I feel lucky we made it through and my family is okay. I'm so sorry for anyone who lost loved ones due to COVID. Story 65. When my aunt was about to marry her then fiancé, a week before the wedding, decided he didn't want to get married anymore. Since they were religious and everything, My aunt was desperate and begged him to go through with it, as would be an embarrassment to the family. He even canceled the civil wedding in the registry, and she had to go back to the registry office and ask the clerk to reschedule. The clerk said she couldn't reschedule unless he came in and confirmed he wanted to get married, so my aunt made him go back and say he did. They got married. Of course it was a bad idea. 15 years later, they separated, full of resentment, 15 years of unhappiness. It would have been better if they had never married. Story 66. I was a wedding caterer for many years. Only cancellation I remember was because it involved a fairly well-known playwright. His fiancée sent me the recipe for his favorite 7-layer dip. Then about a week before the wedding, they canceled because come to find out, he was still technically married to his ex. Fiancée was pissed. It was a scandal, LOL. The dip was disgusting, BTW. Story 67. I was an officiant at a very difficult wedding. One side was Colombian Catholic, the other side Thai Buddhist. I was asked to perform the ceremony in the most secular way possible because neither side could agree on anything, and the bride and groom were just plain sick of the fighting. The previous officiant had quit rather suddenly. I have known this couple for over 10 years, and neither family liked the other's significant other. I spent a lot of time studying the two types of marriage ceremonies and trying to find a secular combination in the spirit of their religions to offend the least amount of people, a neutral common ground. I met with the bride and groom hours before the ceremony, and both seemed to be prepared for whatever. The venue was amazing, like out of a 1920s Great Gatsby movie set, Art Deco motif. The hotel itself dated back to that era and hadn't changed much. The ceremony was going to be held in the foyer of the hotel, which had sweeping marble stairs to each side. The DJ had set up, people were sitting around waiting. About 30 minutes before the ceremony, I saw the bride run out of the hotel with her entourage in tow. She was already in her wedding gown, and while that was a little weird, I felt like she was running to the CVS next door to get some hairpins or something like that. They seemed harried, but not upset or anything. The time for the ceremony came and went. Everyone was standing around, waiting. 15 minutes passed, then 30 minutes passed. Everyone was asking around, but the bride's entourage and the groom's side weren't around. The people in charge were missing. Finally, at about 45 minutes, the best man came out, looking scared and confused. He announced that the wedding was off and that all the cake and catering was asked to be donated to the homeless. We needed to go home. He was sorry, and the groom was unable to make the announcement himself because he was too despondent. The bride had run off. First, I was shocked because these two had lived together for 10 years and in some really bad economic conditions for half of that. I never got the impression they had any relationship trouble, though. When I was alone with each one over the years, they would talk very fondly about the other. Then someone said, "Again?" And I was informed by a family that 2 months earlier, the same thing had happened, only at a different venue. That was my second shock. I had not been told I was the second officiant for a second wedding. I didn't even know that there was a first wedding, so we all left. Attempts to contact either friend have been fruitless, but I know that they are no longer together. I still don't know what happened. Story 68. Not me, but someone close to me. The wedding was literally a week away, venue paid for, guests flying in, all of it. Everyone thought they were the perfect couple. Then the bride found a message on his laptop, not cheating, but a draft of a letter he never meant to send. He had written months earlier that he loved her, but wasn't in love anymore, and felt like the wedding was happening because it was the logical next step, not because it felt right. He never told her because he didn't want to hurt her or disappoint their families. She confronted him and he just broke down. She said the hardest part wasn't the wedding being canceled. It was realizing how lonely he must have felt, keeping that inside. They called it off together. No screaming, no cheating, no dramatic scandal. Just two people being brutally honest at the last possible moment. Painful as hell at the time, but they're both happier now. Sometimes the messiest endings save you from an even bigger disaster. Story 69. Didn't happen to me, but a mate of a mate. Let's call him Tom. The bride turned into a bridezilla, which he could deal with, but the family were adding to it as well. So he was marrying into money, but certainly wasn't from money. And he told her, "Look, we can do whatever you want, but we can't do black tie. I want all my people to be able to wear their suits and not have to worry about the cost." She said fine. Her dad said that they'd pay for it. So the wedding was shaping up to be one of those mega weddings. In a castle, she'll have 2 wedding dresses, a massive iconic church for the ceremony, etc. A big fudge-off wedding, so to speak. About a month before the wedding, she sent updated dress codes to all the guests without telling him. He got a phone call from his brother saying that he thought it wasn't a black tie and there wasn't much time left. So he spoke to her and she said he's got it wrong or whatever, to come to the house. Her parents were buying it as a gift, and she was decorating it. He went there, and her dad was there, and she wasn't. Basically, the dad laid out all the expenses that were going into this wedding, the gift he was giving them, the location, the strings pulled to make this perfect for her daughter, and how it would just not look right if only her side of the family were wearing black tie. He was asked that no one would be able to get tuxedos now, but it turns out that all her side was informed it was black tie from the get-go, and they were hoping that he would come around to the idea of the tuxedo naturally when they saw the venue, church, etc. Tom said that he's going to message everyone on his side of the wedding and tell them to ignore the last message. The dad said something about being ridiculous. The whole event will be a massive waste of money, and he has a mind to pull the whole thing because it's costing him too much. Oh, I should mention, Tom isn't really normal. He has very strong opinions of principles and told him something to the effect that he's going to message everyone on both sides of the family that it's no longer black tie as this, the agreement that he made with his wife, and there will be a notice on the wedding site that only suits are required. The dad said if he does that, he'll pay for nothing, and the wedding is off. Tom said sounds like the wedding. Obviously, the fiancé heard from her father and told him to grow up, that she spoke to Tom's parents and they don't mind. Tom then sent an email saying the wedding was off. I wasn't invited, but I spoke to Tom, and I said from the outside, I think he massively overreacted. For him, though, he said he no longer trusted the person he was marrying, that he asked for one thing, and instead of being truthful, she went behind his back 3 times. He also said that the father unveiled himself that day, and he absolutely did not want to be in debt to him, TLDR. Wedding was canceled due to the dress code. Answer, you might think he was overreacting, but honestly, he sounds smart. If he let something like that go, her family would keep pushing his boundaries over time. And the issue of the dad wanting control and the daughter lying to her partner and ceding to her parents would be repeated over and over. It might seem silly to take a stand over something like that, but when it comes down to it, small things can sometimes show you that this person is not a person of character and that you don't want to be tied to them forever. No sense in trying to build on a rotten foundation. People who let their boundaries be erased little by little often wake up in a decade or more and realize how much control over their own lives was taken away from them. Story 70. COVID happened. We were going to have quite an international wedding, but had to cancel it a month before.